So another important characteristic of um, HTML documents that our elements can have attributes. So attributes are just more um, information that we can pass to the browser. There are global attributes, basically attributes that can be used in all elements, and we have like more like local or really specific attributes that can be used only within certain elements. So I'm going to talk to you about three main attributes that we're going to be using a lot. At least two of them I know that we're going to be using a lot. The first one is language. Language allows the browser to understand what actual language you are using to write your content. So in this case, language by specification has to be declared at the HTML element level. So how we do that? So we click at the end of the HTML characters, we put in space here, and then we just type LANG equal, and then we put the language. In this case is English. Now I want you to notice what I did here. Again, an attribute is basically the attribute itself. In this case, language attribute is LANG equal signs, and then the value for that attribute. Now, one thing that I want you to know is by specification, we don't need these quotation marks. These quotation marks could be, if we want, we can get rid of them. So for example, if I do this is completely fine. Now, it's hard to read. So in the industry, or it's a good practice to add the quotation marks, so we know that that's the value of this particular attribute. So language is an attribute that we can use globally in terms of any of the elements or any of the elements in HTML can have a language attribute. Let's say that I have this paragraph here that is in English, right? This is my first website. This is so cool. Let's say I want to translate this. So I'm going to type, and I want to translate this to Spanish. Okay. So and I'm just going to translate the first part, like this is my first website. The only thing that I wrote here is basically that translation. This is my first website. But now the browser might get confused because this is English and this is Spanish. But the browser doesn't know that. So we have to tell the browser that this is actually Spanish. How do we do that? We use the language attribute. So we do lang, again, equal, quotation marks, and we do ES, Spanish. So now why this is important to do? Because when we have like screen readers and other kind of like accessibility software running alongside the browser will know, hey, you know what, this is at Spanish and my dictionary is English, so I might not read this part, otherwise it's gonna sound weird. So that's why we have to basically declare the language sometimes. And again, the important thing here is to declare the language at the HTML level. So first of all, language. That's the first attribute that I want to show you today. The other attribute is ID. So the ID attribute basically allows me to identify a particular element as unique within the document. That's why it's ID. It's an identification. So let's say that I have this H1 and I want just to say, hey, I can have just one H1 in my document and I want to give it an ID because I'm going to do something else later with it. Okay, we just type as an attribute ID equal quotation, and we're going to say main H, for example, main header. So that's my ID. Now, the main characteristic of this ID attribute is you can have just one ID value per document, meaning because the value here is main H, I can just have one. That's the most important thing to understand. So that's ID. ID again allow us to identify unique elements within the HTML document. Now, let's say that I want to identify a group of elements that they are alike, or I want to, using CSS, I want to apply different kind of, I want to apply for all elements, I want to apply the same format. For that case, we use an attribute called classes. And basically classes can be reused, okay? So when I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna separate this element here. I'm gonna duplicate the first paragraph. And to do that in bracket, you press Command D if you're in a Mac, or Control D if you're in a PC. So basically, instead of writing this paragraph again, I just duplicate it, and I'm gonna do this. I can actually, this is a good trick to do too. If you click on your opening tag, you hold Command and you click on your second paragraph, you will see that I have now two cursors going on here. So I can write in these two lines at the same time. So I'm gonna do space, and I'm gonna do class, and I'm gonna do a class of paragraph. So I'm gonna move this here so you can see it better. So what I did here, I added an attribute of class to these two paragraphs at the same time, and I added the same class because that's what I want. Again, classes are used to identify several elements that are going to share certain attributes, and we do this because this is kind of the basics to use CSS.